You want to get the press to the handstand? Well, we're here to help you out. I'm GMB Fitness head coach Ryan Hurst.
And I'm GMB lead trainer Eduardo Orihuela, and this very comprehensive video is going to help you get the press to handstand.
By the way, this video has an extremely detailed article with a training plan to go with it. Check out the link in the description. First off, there's a couple things that would be good to have before jumping into the press to handstand training.
Be sure that you have pain-free wrists, you're able to perform a slow and controlled Frogger, and you feel comfortable being upside down in a handstand. Doesn't mean the handstand has to be perfect, but the better off you're able to do a handstand, the easier things are going to be for you. Check out the links in the description for videos on improving your wrist mobility, the Frogger, and the handstand.
Now this video is broken up into 3 parts: the warm-up, the movements, and how to train everything. Let's get into it. We're first going to take a look at the wrists. Now, I'm going to show you a few exercises you can use. Doesn't mean you need to do them all. I would choose 1 or 2 and make sure that you focus on doing them well. I would suggest doing these for about a minute. You can have your fingers facing forward and you can pulse about 5 times. You can hold that in range about 10 seconds up to about 20 seconds and then repeat that. Now, when you're performing this, make sure that you're pushing down and away from the floor. It doesn't matter which version of these wrist exercises you're doing, just make sure that you're pushing down and away from the floor. 5 pulses, hold for about 10 to 20 seconds, fingers facing forward, facing back. If you need to, adjust your hands, bring your fingers closer to your knees to make it a little easier for you. Perfectly fine. You can even flip your hands over so that the backs of your hands are on the ground. Now, when I'm doing this, I want you to notice that my arms are straight and I pull my fingers in closer to my knees. It's going to make it easier for me to do this. I have my elbow pits facing forward. Again, I'm performing 5 pulses when I'm doing this, and then I'll hold that in range about 10 to 20 seconds.
Warm up your shoulders with shoulder shrugs, and you're going to move your scapulas in a way that can mimic the freestanding press to handstand. And so you're going to move your shoulders up, forward and down, up, backward and down, and you'll repeat this and getting your shoulders nice and warm.
For the last warm up, we're going to do what I call the rolling pancake. And so from a seated position, you're going to roll back, open up your legs, and then bring your chest forward. In the beginning, I suggest to go light with this. In other words, you don't want to just try and push your chest all the way to the floor right in the beginning. Slowly and gradually roll back, and then as you roll forward, exhale as you open your legs a little wider. Bring your chest a little closer to the floor, sliding your hands out. Make sure though that whenever you're performing this, that you keep your chest up and you don't round your back. Doesn't really matter if you get your chest down to the floor or not. What matters is that you're improving your flexibility and mobility.
There are 3 subgroups for the movements: lifts, negatives, and combinations.
When training the press to the handstand, we'll practice both a lift and a negative, eventually working to combine those into the full press to handstand. Let's look at the first category, lifts. Now the hip lift setup is the most important move here, since it's how you're going to initiate the press to handstand. So be sure to spend plenty of time in mastering it. We'll get into this position by straddling our legs, not too wide, not too narrow. Now from here, you're going to push down and away from the floor, screwing your arms and bringing your shoulders over your hands. Doing this, you're going to push your hips up into the air, allow the heels to come up off the ground. This is the hip lift setup. You need to get really good at this. Don't let your shoulders go too far past your hands. We want to try and keep our shoulders over our hands. If you go too far beyond your hands, it's just going to put too much strain and we get out of the necessary position that we want to have. It's going to help us for the press to the handstand. Now looking at this from a different angle, you can see the distance of my feet in relation to my hands. And as well, I'm pushing down and away from the floor, making sure I get scapular elevation. We want to focus on pushing pretty much as hard as you can in the very beginning. Screwing the arms inward. This is going to allow you to get better scapular elevation and properly load the shoulders over the hands. And this is going to allow you to be able to bring your heels up off of the ground. Our goal is actually to bring our hands as close to our feet as possible. This is going to mimic the press to the handstand. And everything is the same. We push down and through the floor, making sure that we have scapular elevation and we bring our heels up off the ground. Now, if you're having any trouble with your hands, you can always turn your fingers out to the side to take pressure off the wrist. This can be done for all the movements. By the way, be sure to give yourself a good break between practicing the moves. You can stretch your wrists and move your shoulders and neck around before getting back into the work.
Next, we have the straddle jump to handstand. Now, this is more for you to be able to work on negatives, but it's also good in that it'll teach you balance and allow you to practice your handstand at the same time. From the squat position, you're going to kick up and use the momentum to get inverted. You're going to form this shape that looks like the number 7 and do your best to open up your shoulders and spread your legs apart. From here, extend your hips and work on bringing your shoulders and feet directly above your hands, forming a straight line.
The straight leg Frogger has a few variations, but the basic premise is putting the hip lift setup into motion. Our first variation is the basic straight leg Frogger, simply where you load the front and then pull your feet forward. Now, in all of these variations, I want you to really make sure that you're pushing down and through the floor, keeping the arms straight. This is very, very important when you're performing this straight leg Frogger. As you get better with this, what you can do is you can start loading that a bit more to allow you to push your hips even higher up into the air and floating your feet up off of the ground. It's going to take some time, but with that push, you will find that the feet will start floating higher and higher. You can start actually pushing your legs out to the side. When you perform this, I like to point my toes a little bit as I lift the legs right here, and then pause before bringing the feet back down. Gradually, we'll find that the hips will start floating higher and higher, almost as if you're performing the press to handstand.
Finally, we have the wall roll up. This is a tricky position to get into, but you're going to allow your upper back and shoulders to rest along the wall. Play around with the hand placement as it's going to be about 6 to 8 inches from the wall depending on your limb lengths. Hands could face in any direction, but my personal preference is sideways, as I still get good grip on the floor, but it doesn't require as much wrist flexibility. Pushing hard into the ground, keeping your arms straight, the first movement will be to point your toes and split your legs apart. From here, gradually extend your hips by rounding your spine and continuing to spread your legs apart. Think rolling one vertebrae up the wall at a time. Once your hips are fully extended, then bring your feet together to handstand and kick off of the wall.
Remember to check out our article that goes into great detail with a full training plan.
Next up, we have negatives, or the downward portion. This is a very short list containing only 2 movements: the wall handstand negative and the freestanding handstand negative. Let's take a look at the wall handstand negative. Kick up to handstand with your hands about 6 to 8 inches away from the wall and place your upper back against the wall. From here, straddle your legs and begin rolling your spine down one vertebrae at a time. From here, do your best to compress and close the gap between your thighs and your chest. This is the freestanding press to handstand negative. It's very similar in that you want to articulate the spine and elevate the scapulas, but because your shoulders are not resting on the wall, they will have to move and coordinate with your legs. As you roll down, you'll need to shift your shoulders slightly forward. Do your best to delay this movement in your shoulder until your thighs pass parallel. But this will totally depend on your overall strength and mobility. Remember to shrug your shoulders and compress your thighs to your chest to make this as efficient as possible.
Now finally, we have the culminations, which is where you're going to be working on both a lift and negative movement together.
Roll up to handstand plus negative. This is where we put both together and then work on multiple reps of those. You'll start at the bottom, roll your spine up the wall and straddle your legs. To get multiple reps, the challenge here would be to not set your feet down on the ground, but to bring them together and then immediately start the next rep. This is the hip jump to handstand plus freestanding negative. Start with a little hop and use that momentum to move into handstand. Then very slowly work on the press to handstand negative.
Now before we get to the final move, remember to check out that article after watching this video.
This is the full press to handstand. This is it. This is where you tie it all together to unlock this amazing skill. Keep in mind that the first time you do anything, it won't be super easy or maybe as pretty as you'd like it to be. You might have to bend your knees, maybe you forget to point your toes, or maybe rely too much on strength. The important thing is to learn the movement first in a way that feels comfortable for you right now. And as you get stronger, more flexible, better balance, more confidence, you can adjust your technique to make it more efficient.
All right, it's time to put this all together. And here's how I suggest you train the press to handstand if your only goal for the session is working on it. We'll do this by using the 5P framework. Now, first off, we have prep, and we'll use the wrist, shoulder, and rolling pancake movements for 1 minute each.
Number 2, use the hip lift setup position, going in and out of the position for 30 seconds.
Now, practice. You're going to choose a lift movement appropriate to your level and perform at least 5 quality repetitions, giving yourself a good break in between reps. You can also set a clock for 5 to 10 minutes and focus on quality repetitions during that time period. Now, if you're just starting out with the press of the handstand, then I suggest that you focus on the hip lift setup or even just a slow Frogger. Other options as you progress could be straight leg Frogger variations or the wall roll up once you're ready for it. Now, for the second part of this, you're going to choose a negative movement that's appropriate to your level and perform at least 5 quality repetitions, making sure to give yourself a good break between reps. Same as before, you can set a clock for 5 to 10 minutes. Focus on quality repetitions during that time period. Now, this will either be the wall handstand negative or the freestanding handstand negative.
Play. This is optional depending on how you feel that day. I suggest only performing a couple repetitions to explore the movement. Choose one movement that you already feel comfortable with, either a lift or a negative, and see how slowly you can perform it. Allow a good rest between reps.
A push. This is where you want to get in some volume, but you're going to do it in a safe way. And I suggest using the first variation of the straight leg Frogger for this. Set your clock for 1 minute and perform the movement continuously for that minute. You'll rest for about a minute and then perform for up to 3 sets. Remember to focus on pushing away from the floor and slowly pulling your feet forward. This is going to really strengthen your arms and the core to the max. Finish off with either the 3-point bridge or the standard bridge. I also find that hanging from a bar helps at the end of my press to handstand sessions.
Ponder. Take some time to reflect on how the session went. Did you choose the appropriate movements for today's session? What do you need to focus on for the next session? How are your wrists and shoulders feeling?
As I mentioned earlier, your wrists are really going to take a beating when working on the press to the handstand. So don't just jump into a higher variation or try a new move variation too soon. This is going to take time, so rushing into it's only going to lead to frustration and possibly injury, and we don't want that. And remember that turning your fingers out will help to save your wrists. By the way, I also discussed some other common issues in the article, so again, be sure to check that out after watching the rest of this video.
The press to handstand is a tough skill, and chances are you're going to reach plateaus in your progress. After all, progress is not linear. That's totally normal. But working at a level that's appropriate for you and listening to your body is going to be key to seeing results over the long run.
There you have it, a very comprehensive guide for getting the press to the handstand all by yourself. Remember to check out our article that goes into great detail with a full training plan.